Ravi had chosen his land carefully. Years ago, when he was tired of city life, he had searched far and wide for a place where he could breathe fresh air, see wide-open skies, and live without the constant sound of traffic and noise. At last, he had found a stretch of open land near the edge of town. It was not fancy, but it was enough for him. He built his own wooden house, fenced the fields, and planted trees around the boundaries. The ranch became not only his home, but his pride. The air in the mornings was fresh and cool. Birds sang from the oak trees, and his dog Bruno chased rabbits near the tall grass. At night, the stars looked so clear above his head that Ravi sometimes spent hours sitting on the porch, enjoying the silence. Life on the ranch was not easy. He had to mend fences, carry water, and cut wood, but it was honest work. It gave him peace, but peace does not last forever. Trouble often finds its way even into the quietest corners. And for Ravi, that trouble came in the form of the local homeowners association, known as the HOA. The HOA was powerful in town. They decided what color people could paint their houses, how tall the grass should be, and even what kind of mailboxes stood at the edge of the street. Neighbors feared their rules, and many hated the endless fines. But Ravi thought none of this mattered to him, because his ranch stood outside their neighborhood. He was not under their authority. One morning, while drinking tea on his porch, Ravi noticed an envelope stuck in the crack of his gate. It was not delivered by the mailman. Someone had placed it there by hand. Curious, he opened it. The letter inside was from the HOA. It said his wooden ranch gate did not meet community standards and must be replaced with a metal gate. If he refused, he would be fined. Ravi laughed to himself. How can they find me? This is my land, not theirs. He crumpled the letter and tossed it into the fire pit. He thought the matter was finished, but a week later another envelope arrived. This one accused him of allowing excessive growth of vegetation and ordered him to cut down the oak trees at the corner of his property. Ravi felt his patience grow thin. Those oaks had been there for decades. They gave shade in the summer and beauty in the fall. Nobody had the right to tell him to remove them. Still, he stayed calm. He wrote a short reply on plain paper. This ranch is private property. HOA rules do not apply here. Please stop sending letters. He left it at the gate. The letters did not stop. Instead, they grew bolder. One claimed that his fence was unsafe and unattractive. Another demanded he remove the windmill he had built near his well. It became clear that the HOA was not simply mistaken. They wanted control over his ranch. Ravi tried to ignore them. He focused on his daily work. He repaired the barn roof, planted vegetables, and walked with Bruno along the fields. He told himself that paper threats could not harm him. But deep inside, he sensed that the matter would not end with letters. His feeling proved right one evening when the sun was setting behind the hills. Ravi was sitting on the porch sharpening a tool when he heard the low growl of an engine. A sleek black car rolled down the dirt road and stopped by his gate. 3 men stepped out. They were not neighbors, and they were not officials. Their suits looked too sharp, their shoes too polished for a ranch road. The men stood tall with hard expressions and spoke to one another in low voices. Then they turned their eyes toward the gate. Ravi set his tool aside and watched. The men walked up and shook the gate as if testing its strength. One of them leaned on it, pushing hard. Another kicked at the bottom rail, muttering something. Their actions carried no respect. They behaved like men who already believed the land belonged to them. Bruno barked loudly, his fur standing on end. Ravi raised a hand to calm the dog, but he kept his eyes fixed on the strangers. He did not shout. He did not rise from his chair. He simply observed. The tallest man finally noticed Ravi watching from the porch. Instead of greeting him, the man smirked, whispered something to his companions, and walked back to the car. Within moments, they drove away, leaving only a trail of dust in the air. That night, Ravi lay awake in bed, replaying the scene in his mind. Who were these men? Were they hired by the HOA, or did they act on their own? Their behavior had not been that of simple messengers. They had moved like enforcers people sent to frighten. The next morning, Ravi saddled Bruno's leash and walked along the fence line. His suspicions were confirmed. 2 posts had been broken during the night. Boot prints marked the dirt. Someone had trespassed. Someone had tried to damage his land. Bruno sniffed the tracks, growling deep in his throat. Ravi bent down and touched the soil. The prints were fresh. He straightened and looked across the wide-open fields. He felt no fear, only a calm certainty that trouble was growing. Later in the day, as the sun climbed high, the same black car appeared again. This time, the men did not stop at the gate. They drove right up to the porch, their tires kicking up dirt and stones. Ravi stood, his arms crossed, waiting. The tallest man stepped out first, followed by the others. He had a cold smile on his face. "You must be Ravi," the man said. His tone was sharp like steel. "We represent the HOA. Your property is under our rules, whether you like it or not," Ravi answered in a steady voice. "This land is not under your HOA. You have no authority here." The man's smile faded. "You are making a mistake. If you do not obey, things will get harder for you." Ravi's eyes did not move from the man's face. "This ranch is mine. I built it, I own it, and I will protect it. Leave." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. The two men behind the leader shifted their weight as if ready for action, but the leader raised a hand to stop them. He gave Ravi one last look, then turned back to the car. As they drove away, Ravi remained standing on the porch. He knew they would return. Men like that did not give up easily. When night fell again, Ravi sat in the dark with Bruno at his side. The stars above were calm, but his mind was sharp with thought. He had faced storms, wild animals, and hard winters on this ranch. Now it seemed he would have to face something else. Arrogant men who believed they could take control of what was not theirs. The first move had been made. The letters were only the beginning. The visits from strangers were a warning. Ravi understood the meaning well, and so, under the quiet sky, he began to plan. The next morning on the ranch started like any other. The sun rose slowly over the fields, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Birds sang in the oak trees, and a cool breeze passed through the grass. Ravi carried a bucket of water to the barn while Bruno ran ahead, chasing a butterfly. On the surface, everything looked peaceful, but Ravi's mind was heavy. He kept thinking about the men in the black car. Their words were still sharp in his memory. He had faced threats before in life, but never on his own land. The ranch was supposed to be his safe place, the one part of the world where no one could disturb him. Yet now strangers had stepped onto it, speaking as if they owned it. The thought angered him, but he did not show his anger. He knew that rushing with emotion would only bring mistakes. Instead, he decided to stay calm and watch carefully. When he reached the fence at the far end of the property, Ravi noticed something troubling. 2 wooden posts were bent again, and the ground nearby showed fresh marks. He bent down, brushing the soil with his hand. The boot prints were clear. Someone had returned during the night. The damage was not large, but it was enough to send a message. Someone wanted him to feel weak, to feel pressured. Bruno barked at the broken wood, growling low as if he too understood that strangers had crossed into their land. Ravi patted the dog's head and spoke softly. "Do not worry, Bruno, this is our place. No one can take it." Later that day, as the sun reached its highest point, Ravi sat on his porch repairing a tool. The silence was broken by the low growl of an engine. His eyes lifted to the dirt road and his jaw tightened. The same black car was coming again. It stopped right at his porch this time. Dust rose in the air, covering the fresh grass. 3 men stepped out. They did not look like neighbors, and they carried no papers in their hands. They looked the same as before, sharp suits, dark shoes, cold eyes. The tallest one walked forward with the same confidence as the night before. "Good afternoon," the tall man said in a mocking tone. "We gave you fair warning yesterday and you refused to listen. Now we will explain more clearly." Ravi set his tool down but did not stand. He leaned back in his chair, calm, his eyes steady. "You explained enough yesterday. I already told you that this land is not under the HOA. You have no right to give me orders." The man's smile thinned. "You are stubborn. But stubbornness will not save you. The HOA does not like disobedience. If you do not follow, you will pay." The 2 men behind him stepped closer, crossing their arms. Bruno growled from the porch, his ears pulled back. Ravi raised a hand to calm the dog. His voice remained level. "You may scare the people in town with letters and fines, but this ranch is not yours, it is mine. You will not decide what happens here." For a moment the air was silent. The men looked at Ravi as if he were foolish, as if he had not understood the game being played. But in truth it was they who had not understood him. Ravi was not a man who surrendered. Finally, the tall man stepped back. "We will give you one more chance," he said slowly. "Cut down those trees. Replace the gate. Or next time it will not be just words." With that, the men returned to their car and drove away, leaving the dust rising once more. Ravi sat still for a long time after they left. His heart was steady, but his mind was sharp. He knew exactly what their words meant. They would not stop. They would return, and next time they might bring more than words. That evening, Ravi walked the ranch slowly, thinking of every corner, every post, every gate. He studied the land not as a farmer, but as a man preparing for defense. The oak trees swayed gently in the wind, the barn doors creaked, and the distant hills stood tall. Everything looked calm, but he could see the places where trouble could come. He remembered the letters, the threats, the visits. Each step of the HOA had grown more bold. First paper, then men in suits, now warnings of something worse. It was a clear path, and it was leading toward conflict. As he stood by the old oak tree, Ravi thought of his past. He had grown up in a busy city where people often tried to push him around. He had learned long ago that giving in to bullies only made them stronger. That lesson had guided him throughout life, and now it returned to him once more. He would not allow anyone to walk over his land. Night came. The moon rose bright and clear, and the stars shone above. Ravi sat on the porch with Bruno, watching the dirt road. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, but the road stayed empty. Still, Ravi did not relax. He knew the silence was only temporary. The next morning, he rose early and began his daily work. But even as he carried hay to the barn and filled the water trough, he kept glancing toward the road. His mind worked quickly, turning over ideas, plans, and possibilities. If the men returned, he would be ready. 3 days passed with no sign of the car. For a moment, Ravi thought perhaps they had given up. But on the fourth evening, just as the sun was sinking low, the black car appeared once more. Ravi set down his hammer and wiped his hands on a cloth. He did not rush. He did not hide. He simply walked to the porch and waited. This time, only 2 men stepped out. The tallest one was not there. Instead, the second man from before approached, his voice sharp. "We told you to follow the rules. You ignored us. This will not end well for you." Ravi looked at him steadily. "You can threaten all you want. My answer will not change. This is my land. It does not belong to the HOA." The man's face twisted in anger. "You think you are strong because you live far from town, but we can reach you even here." Bruno barked loudly, pulling at his leash, ready to defend. Ravi's voice cut through the tension. "If you come again, do not expect me to only use words." The men glared, then turned sharply and left. The car roared down the road, vanishing in the dust. When they were gone, Ravi stood in silence. His words had been simple, but they carried weight. He knew the men would remember them, and he knew what must come next. That night he sat at his table with a lantern burning low. He drew a rough map of his land on a piece of paper. He marked the gates, the fences, the weak spots. Slowly he began to design something new. He was not only a rancher now. He was a defender. Bruno slept by his feet, but Ravi's eyes remained sharp. He did not feel fear. He felt determination. The HOA had crossed a line, and the men had tested his patience. He would not wait quietly for their next move. He would prepare. The ranch that had been only a home would now become something more. It would be a place of strength, a place where no outsider could walk without facing consequences. As the lantern flickered, Ravi leaned back in his chair. The night was calm, the stars silent, but inside his mind the plan was already beginning to take shape. He knew the next chapter of this struggle was coming soon, and when it did, he would be ready. Ravi woke up before the first light of dawn. The air was still cool, and the land was silent except for the soft chirping of crickets in the grass. Bruno stretched near the porch, yawning loudly, while Ravi stood with his hands on the wooden rail looking out over the fields. His mind was steady but full of thoughts. The visits from the men had shown him one thing clearly. The HOA would not stop. They had already broken his fence and threatened him directly. They believed fear was enough to control him. But fear had no home on this ranch. If they wanted to test him, then he would answer in a way they did not expect. Ravi was not looking for trouble, but he also knew he could not remain passive. If he simply waited, the men would keep coming, each time with stronger threats. He needed to show them that his land was not weak, that it could defend itself. So he decided to prepare traps, not to harm deeply, but to teach a lesson that would last. After finishing his morning tea, he walked across the ranch, studying every corner with sharp eyes. His first stop was the front gate, the same wooden gate the men had shaken and kicked. On the outside it looked simple, just old planks nailed together. But Ravi began to make changes. He gathered strong steel rods from the barn, cut them to size, and carefully placed them inside the wooden frame of the gate. From the outside, it still looked like an ordinary wooden gate, but now it was as solid as iron. If anyone tried to kick it again, they would meet a painful surprise. Bruno wagged his tail, following him as he worked. The dog barked once as if approving the plan. Next, Ravi turned to the pathway near the fence, the spot where the boot prints had been seen before. It was clear the men liked to move through that area. He decided to set a trick there too. He placed loose wooden boards on the ground and covered them lightly with soil and dust. Beneath the boards, he poured a thin layer of oil. It was invisible to the eye, but the surface was slick. Anyone stepping there would lose balance quickly. When the sun reached its height, Ravi stopped for a break. He sat in the shade of the oak tree eating bread and fruit, while Bruno lay at his feet. His eyes were calm, but his thoughts were sharp. Each trap he made was not for revenge, but for protection. He wanted to make sure that when the men returned, they would learn the truth, that this land was not theirs to command. After resting, he continued with more plans. He tied small bells to the back gate, hidden among the branches of a bush. The bells were simple, but they would ring softly if anyone touched the gate. That way, even at night, Ravi would know if intruders tried to sneak in. He also stretched a rope low across the ground near the barn entrance. In the dark, it would be hard to see. Anyone running in a hurry would trip over it and fall. By the time the sun began to set, the ranch looked the same as always, quiet and peaceful. The oak trees still swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the birds still sang from their nests. But now the land carried secrets. It had become a field of defense, a silent warning to any who dared to trespass again. That night, Ravi sat on his porch, lantern glowing by his side. He kept his ears open, listening for the faint sound of bells or footsteps. Bruno rested nearby but stayed alert, his head lifting at every rustle in the grass. Hours passed quietly, but Ravi felt no impatience. He knew that sooner or later the men would return, and indeed they did. 2 nights later, under a pale moon, the faint sound of an engine reached Ravi's ears. He did not move suddenly. He simply lowered his hand to Bruno, calming the dog's growl. The black car came into view, its headlights off, moving slowly down the dirt road. The car stopped near the gate. 3 figures stepped out. Even from a distance, Ravi recognized their tall shapes and stiff movements. It was the same men. They thought the darkness would hide them, but Ravi had been waiting. The men walked up to the gate. One of them laughed quietly, as if already confident. The tallest man raised his boot and kicked hard against the wooden planks. A loud crack rang out, but it was not the sound of wood breaking. It was the sound of his foot meeting hidden steel. The man staggered back, clutching his foot in pain. His laughter turned into a curse. The others rushed to him, confused. They had expected weakness, but found strength instead. Ravi remained seated on the porch, lantern glowing faintly. He did not shout or move. He simply watched. The second man, angry now, turned toward the side of the fence where they had broken in before. He stepped onto the path quickly, but the moment his boot touched the loose boards, his foot slid. His body flew backward, and he landed flat on his back with a heavy thud. Dust rose in the air as he groaned, struggling to rise. The third man, startled, tried to move around quickly toward the barn. But in his hurry, he did not see the rope stretched low across the ground. His foot caught, and he tumbled forward, landing face first in the dirt. Bruno barked loudly now, charging forward a few steps before stopping at Ravi's command. The dog's growl filled the night air, echoing across the ranch. Ravi finally stood. He lifted the lantern high, and its light fell across the field, revealing the 3 men in their undignified states. One was hopping on one leg, another lay groaning in the dirt, and the third was spitting dust after his fall. Ravi's voice carried firmly across the quiet night. I warned you. This land is not yours to control. You come here again, and you will only find more pain waiting. The men looked at him, their pride broken. The tall one limped toward the car, holding his bruised foot. The second rolled onto his side, groaning, and crawled to his knees. The third stumbled up, wiping dirt from his face. They did not speak. They did not laugh. They only dragged themselves back to the car, bruised and humiliated. Bruno barked once more. Watching them go, The car engine roared, and within moments, the black vehicle vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but dust and silence. Ravi lowered the lantern and sat back on his porch. His face was calm, his eyes steady. He felt no joy in their suffering, only certainty. He had made his message clear. The ranch was not weak. The ranch would not bow. As the night grew quiet again, Ravi looked up at the stars. They shone brightly as if watching over him. Bruno rested his head on Ravi's boots, sighing deeply. For now, the danger had passed, but Ravi knew the struggle was not finished. The HOA might not stop with just 3 men. They might send others. They might try another way. But one thing was certain. The ranch was ready. And so was he. The night after the men had been driven off, Ravi sat quietly on his porch, the lantern's flame burning low beside him. Bruno lay at his feet, resting but not fully asleep. The ranch was silent except for the soft rustling of leaves in the oak trees. Ravi leaned back in his chair, his mind calm but alert. He knew that the incident was not the end. People like the men from the black car never admitted defeat easily. If they had been sent once, they could be sent again. And if they came again, they would return with more anger than before. Still, Ravi felt no fear. What he had seen that night gave him certainty. The ranch was strong, and the men had been taught the first lesson. This land would not bow to their arrogance. The next morning, Ravi began his day as usual. He fed the chickens, carried water to the barn, and checked the fences. The traps he had built had worked perfectly, but he knew they needed to remain ready. He checked the boards on the ground, cleaned them, and laid them again with fresh oil. He tightened the rope near the barn and polished the bells so they would ring more clearly at night. Bruno followed him everywhere, barking happily at times, as if proud of the work. Ravi smiled and patted his head. "Good boy, Bruno. Together we will guard this place." By noon, the ranch looked calm again, but Ravi's mind stayed sharp. He thought about the HOA and their endless need for control. Why did they care about his ranch when it was not even part of their neighborhood? Perhaps they hated the fact that one man could live free outside their rules. Perhaps they thought if he remained independent, others might do the same. Whatever the reason, Ravi knew one truth. They wanted to break him, but they could not. 3 days passed quietly. The black car did not return, and no letters arrived at the gate. For a while, Ravi wondered if perhaps the men had given up. But on the 4th evening, just as the sun was dipping low and the sky turned orange, Ravi heard the familiar sound of an engine. He looked up from the barn, wiping sweat from his brow. There it was again, the black car rolling slowly down the dirt road. This time 4 men stepped out, not 3. The tall man with the cold smile returned, his limp faint but visible. He leaned on the car door for a moment before straightening. His eyes burned with quiet anger. The men walked toward the gate. Bruno barked furiously, his body stiff. Ravi placed a calming hand on the dog's back, but his own eyes stayed locked on the strangers. He stepped onto the porch, tall and steady, waiting for them to speak. The tall man pointed a finger at Ravi. "You think you are clever. You think you can mock us with your little tricks, but you will regret this. The HOA does not forget." Ravi's voice was calm but strong. "You came to my land uninvited. You broke my fence. You threatened me. I gave you a fair warning. What happened to you here was not cruelty. It was a lesson." The tall man laughed bitterly. "A lesson? You call humiliation a lesson? My men will not forget lying in your dirt like fools." "Then remember it well," Ravi said, "because if you return again, you will fall harder." The men muttered among themselves, their anger plain. One of them clenched his fists as if ready to fight, but the leader held up a hand. "No," he said firmly. "Not now." He glared at Ravi. "We will be back, and when we return, you will not stop us with tricks." They turned and climbed back into the car, leaving behind the echo of their threats. Ravi stood still as the dust settled. He did not chase them, nor did he argue further. Their anger only confirmed what he already knew. They had been wounded in pride, and pride was often more fragile than bone. That night, Ravi thought deeply. The traps had worked, but he understood something important. The fight was no longer only about fences and gates. It had become about dignity, about respect, about who had the right to stand free. The HOA and their hired men believed they could crush him into submission. But Ravi knew he had to stand firm, not just for himself, but for what his land represented. The following days were busy. Ravi decided to improve his defenses further. He added stronger planks to the barn doors and reinforced the windows of his house. He built new supports for the fence and placed more bells along the back edge of the ranch. Every step he took made the ranch more secure. Bruno seemed to sense the seriousness of the moment. The dog barked less and watched more. He often sat near the road, ears pointed forward, waiting for any sound of the car. One evening, as the sky turned dark, Ravi lit his lantern and sat once more on the porch. He felt the weight of the coming test. He knew the men would not wait long before trying again. The lesson was not yet complete. Hours later, the sound came. The low hum of the engine, the crunch of tires on gravel. Ravi stood slowly, lantern in hand. The black car stopped near the gate, and this time the men stepped out with clear determination. They carried no tools, but their posture was sharp, like men ready to cause harm. The tall man stepped forward first. "This is your final chance," he called. "Take down the gate. Cut the trees, or we will tear them down ourselves." Ravi held the lantern higher, his face steady. "If you try, you will regret it again. The land does not welcome thieves." The tall man's face twisted with rage. "Enough of this." He gave a signal with his hand, and the other men moved forward. One reached the gate and pulled hard, but his hand slipped as the steel reinforcement held strong. Another stepped onto the loose boards by the fence, and as before, his feet slid out from under him. He landed flat with a groan. The third man, rushing forward, ran straight into Bruno. The dog barked fiercely, snapping at his heels. The man stumbled back, tripped over the low rope, and hit the ground. Dust covered his suit. The fourth man tried to circle around, but the bells rang softly, giving him away. Ravi's voice cut through the noise. "Enough! Leave while you can still walk." The tall man, furious and red-faced, clenched his fists. He looked at his fallen men, then at Ravi, who stood calmly with the lantern. For a moment, silence filled the night. Then slowly, the tall man turned away. "Get up!" he growled to his men. "We are leaving." The men struggled to their feet, limping, groaning, covered in dust and shame. They dragged themselves back to the car, their earlier confidence gone. As the car drove away, Ravi lowered his lantern and sat back on the porch. Bruno lay beside him, panting after the excitement. Ravi's eyes were calm, but inside he felt the weight of what had just happened. The men had been beaten again, not with fists, but with patience, preparation, and resolve. He knew they would remember this night. They would remember how their pride had been broken twice on the same land. And that was the true lesson. The ranch was not just wood and soil. It was a place of strength, a place of freedom. And freedom was not given, it was defended. As the stars spread across the sky, Ravi leaned back in his chair, Bruno resting at his side. The danger was not gone, but his spirit was steady. He had shown them the truth, and the truth was clear: this land could not be taken. The next morning, Ravi woke before the sun rose. The ranch was quiet, with only the soft sound of birds beginning to sing in the trees. He stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. Bruno followed him, wagging his tail, but his eyes remained sharp. The night before had been intense, and both man and dog felt the weight of what had happened. Ravi poured water into the trough for the horses and scattered feed for the chickens. His routine was steady, the same as always, but inside he knew everything had changed. The men had come twice now, and both times they had left in shame. Yet Ravi understood people like them. Each failure only made their pride burn hotter. They would not give up until they had either broken him or been completely crushed. After finishing his chores, Ravi sat on the porch with a cup of tea. He watched the dirt road in silence. He knew the men would return. The only question was when and how. He thought about the tall man with the cold smile, the one who led the others. That man's pride had been hurt the most, and Ravi sensed he would do something bold to restore it. By noon, the sun climbed high, and Ravi went to the barn to repair a loose hinge. Bruno barked suddenly, his deep growl echoing across the field. Ravi straightened, listening carefully. A sound floated over the land, the distant rumble of engines, more than one. Ravi walked to the edge of the porch, shading his eyes with one hand. Down the road came not one black car, but two. Dust rose behind them as they rolled forward like a dark cloud. His heart tightened, not with fear, but with focus. This was the moment he had been expecting. The cars stopped at the gate, and the doors opened. 6 men stepped out this time. The tall leader was among them, his face hard and cold, but now he had brought reinforcements. They stood together, a line of dark suits against the golden grass. Bruno barked louder, straining against the porch steps. Ravi placed a calming hand on the dog's head. "Stay close, Bruno," he whispered. "This is our ground. We will face them together," the tall man called out, his voice sharp. "Ravi, this is the end of your stubbornness. You will tear down this gate and follow our rules, or we will tear it down ourselves. You have embarrassed us twice. There will not be a third time." Ravi stepped forward slowly, his boots firm on the ground. His eyes met the tall man's, calm and steady. "You have no right here. This land is mine. I will not bow to your threats. If you try to take what is not yours, you will be the ones who fall again." The tall man gave a short laugh. "Enough of your speeches. Men, move." The 6 men spread out, walking toward the fence with purpose. One grabbed the gate, shaking it hard, while another moved toward the barn. 2 more circled around the side as if to flank Ravi's house. Ravi lifted his hand slightly, giving Bruno the signal. The dog barked and ran toward the circling men, teeth bared. Startled, the men stumbled back, tripping over the low ropes hidden in the grass. They fell hard, coughing in the dust. At the same time, the man pulling the gate stepped onto the slippery boards. His feet shot out from under him, and he landed flat with a painful grunt. The other man near him tried to help, but soon slipped as well. Both rolled on the ground, clutching at their elbows and knees. The tall leader cursed under his breath, rushing forward to steady himself. But the bells hanging in the branches rang out as he brushed past them. Their sound filled the air, sharp and clear, warning of his every step. Ravi did not move from his porch. He only spoke, his voice firm and commanding. "Do you not understand? This land does not welcome you. Every step you take will break you further. Leave before it is too late." But the tall man was blinded by pride. "Do not listen to him," he shouted at his men. "Get up and push through." The men staggered to their feet, covered in dirt and frustration. They tried again, pushing against the fence, pulling at the ropes and shouting angrily. But every step they took led to another failure. One tripped over a hidden beam and crashed to the ground. Another was chased back by Bruno's furious barks. The others found themselves slipping, stumbling, and colliding into one another in confusion. Ravi's traps were simple, but they worked because the men came with arrogance, not caution. Their pride made them blind. Finally, the tall man stood still, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His men were scattered around him, coughing, groaning, and covered in shame. His eyes burned with fury as he glared at Ravi. "You think you have won?" he spat. "This is not victory. This is insult. The HOA will not rest until you are crushed." Ravi's voice remained calm, but it carried power. "What you call insult is only truth. You came to my land to control me, but you have been broken each time. This ranch is not yours to rule. Leave now and never return, or you will crawl away again." For a long moment, silence filled the air. The tall man's face twisted with anger, but then his shoulders dropped slightly, as though even he could no longer deny the reality. His men were beaten without a single strike from Ravi's hand. He turned sharply toward the cars. "We are leaving," he barked. The men obeyed, dragging themselves back to the vehicles, their clothes torn and dusty. They climbed in without a word. The engines roared to life, and the cars sped down the road, leaving only clouds of dust behind. Ravi watched them go, his posture tall and unshaken. Bruno stood beside him, tail wagging proudly, as if he too understood the meaning of the moment. When the sound of the engines faded, Ravi finally sat back down on the porch. He let out a long breath, his eyes drifting over the ranch. The land was quiet again, the air calm and still. But inside, Ravi knew something important had ended. The men might return one day, but they would never come with the same arrogance. They had been humbled, their pride crushed by the very ground they tried to claim. The HOA could send more letters, more words, but the truth was now clear to all of them. Ravi's ranch could not be broken. That night, Ravi lit his lantern and walked through the ranch slowly. He touched the fence, the barn, and the trees. Every part of this land carried his work, his sweat, his love. He had defended it not with fists, but with patience, planning, and unshakable will. Bruno padded beside him, loyal and alert. Ravi knelt down and rubbed the dog's head. "We did well, my friend. They will think twice before stepping here again." The stars stretched across the sky, bright and endless. Ravi stood with his hands on his hips, breathing deeply. The ranch was safe, at least for now. He felt no fear of the future. Whatever came, he would be ready. For the first time in many weeks, Ravi slept deeply. The burden that had weighed on his shoulders was lighter. His dreams were peaceful. filled with wide fields and strong trees, not with the sound of cars or threats. Days turned into weeks. The black cars never returned. The HOA sent no letters. The road by the ranch remained empty and quiet. Life settled into its steady rhythm again. Ravi rose with the sun, worked the land, and rested at night. Bruno guarded faithfully, but he too grew more relaxed, sensing the danger had passed. Sometimes neighbors passing on the road asked Ravi about the men in black suits. Rumors had spread quickly. People whispered about how the HOA's men had gone to the ranch and left crawling, covered in dust. Ravi never told the full story. He only smiled and said, "The land teaches its own lessons." And in a way that was true. The ranch itself had protected him. His traps, his patience, and his steady spirit had shown the intruders that freedom could not be taken by force. As time went on, the lesson of Ravi's ranch became a quiet tale among the community. Some saw it as a story of clever tricks, others as a warning about pride. But to Ravi it was something deeper. It was proof that a man who stood for what was right and refused to bow could face even the strongest threats and remain unbroken. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Ravi sat once more on his porch. Bruno lay beside him, eyes half closed. The air was warm, filled with the smell of fresh grass. Ravi leaned back, peaceful and content. The fight was over. The ranch was safe. And the lesson had been taught not only to the men in black suits, but to anyone who believed that force could conquer dignity. The land was free, and so was he.